Hey everybody, it's Rich Tomaselli again, founder and editor of Hvsr Sports Report, and welcome to the second HVSR podcast. Now, the inaugural podcast started last week. It's still on the site if you want to take a listen to it, so just go to HudsonValleySportsReport.com. For this week, I'm introducing some, we'll call it consistent content to the podcast, so listeners have an idea of what we'll be talking about. We will have leading off, which is the main topic of discussion, then shout outs, where we get a chance to talk about players and teams, and the final word, which obviously will wrap everything up. When we get back to playing sports, we'll have more content and more topics. Simple as that. As I said in the first podcast, we will try to make these things every week during the high school sports season, and probably every other week during summer until fall sports start practicing again in August. And that's what I want to lead off with today, the status of high school sports. Look, you guys know me. I've done everything in my sports writing career that I wanted to do over 33 years. Everything I wanted to cover, everything I've ever wanted to write about, people that I wanted to interview, some of the biggest names in sports, and nothing has given me more pleasure than to have come home several years ago back to New York and started this site to expand coverage of local high school sports. So it literally pains me to say this. I don't believe we will have a spring high school sports season in the Hudson Valley in Section 1, in Section 9, or in the entire state this year. I was going to talk about the reason for that, and that to me was being the current school closures, and I'll get to that in a minute. But just as I was putting together my thoughts and talking points for today's podcast, came the news that Section 11 in Long Island, which is Suffolk County, has canceled sports for the rest of the year. No sports at all this spring. And then just a few hours later, Section 8 in Long Island, Nassau County, did the same thing. Granted, the island has been one of the hardest hit areas in the state, along with New York City, for COVID-19, but still, that's a dramatic step, a big step. And to me, that's the first domino to fall. Somebody had to do it. Somebody had to have the gonads, for lack of a better term, to be the first one to make that very heartbreaking, frustrating decision. But it's been made, and now you will likely see the other 9 sections in the state, including Section 1 and Section 9 in our coverage area, follow the lead and shutter the season entirely if the state doesn't step in and do it first themselves. I was somewhat optimistic that spring sports could come back. To prepare for this podcast, I talked to a bunch of coaches and athletic directors, and the consensus was this. We need a week of practice. Then we can come back and play a shortened, kind of truncated regular season, maybe just 8 to 10 league games or matches, and then roll into sectional championship tournaments. And they all agreed there would be no state playoffs or state championships this year. The season would end with the crowning of sectional champions in each of their respective tournaments. But that optimism kind of drained out of me after I read a very good article in the Middletown Times-Herald Record today about the difficulties of bringing students back to school, physically back to the building, that is. You got to remember that the time frame plays a humongous role in all this. First of all, Dr. Robert Zayas, head of the New York State Public High School Athletic Association, is already on record as saying that if students can't return to their schools, can't physically go back to the building, there will be no sports. Then you had Governor Cuomo last week extending the New York pause, as he calls it, with the shutdowns of many businesses and schools. He extended that to May 15. So combined, and reading that article today, which was very insightful. By the way, if you haven't had a chance to read it already, please go online and do it. But generally, to summarize, here was the gist. It would be difficult, if not outright impossible, to prepare thousands of kids to physically return to their old school buildings. And that was for a variety of factors. You can't just say, we're going to end online learning. We're going to stop distance learning and the kids can come on back to school for some good old face-to-face teaching. Lots of questions. Here's mine off the top of my head. Will they have to wear masks? And if so, who's paying for them and who's providing them? Do schools have the capacity to socially distance kids now? Will they have to split the kids into two separate sessions, such as one group goes to school from, I don't know, 7 o'clock in the morning to 11 o'clock, and then another group comes in from noon to 4 p.m., and in between they clean? What kind of cleaning procedures would take place every day? And even, again, in between sessions. What about transportation? How are kids going to socially distance on a bus? So those are just some questions. And even worse, let's say the schools are able to miraculously prepare for all this in less than a month's time. And they'll go back, well, what's today? April 21. Okay, so they have less than a month to prepare. They'll go back on Monday, May 18th, assuming the lockdown restrictions were lifted by the state on May 15th. Is it worth it? Is it really worth it? There would only basically be a month left of school from that point, from May 18th. So why try to rush through it for 30 days when you can have 3 months to fully and better prepare for a return in the fall? So again, that's my thought process there. I remain hopeful. I do. Love high school sports, but we got to go by the old cliche here. You know what they say, hope for the best, prepare for the worst, as much as it might hurt. Wanted to take this time here to give some love to our advertisers. This group has stuck with us, and they are the core sponsors of Hudson Valley Sports Report. Whenever we get back to normal, whatever normal is, please patronize them. Brenny's Pizza in Highland, Kevin and Eric make the best pizza in the area, if you ask me. They're open now, so you can order takeout from there. Bright Multimedia for all your media needs, from photos to videos. They helped us produce a couple of live broadcasts, so they are the best. Center for Physical Therapy, my longtime friend and Lord's graduate Chris Campili. He'll put you back together if you get hurt. Dental Design Studio, Dr. Richard Whalen, another longtime friend of mine and one of the best in the business at what he does. Gold's Gym in LaGrange, hands down, the best place to work out in the valley. Rose and Kieran Insurance. If you go there, ask for my buddy Rob Ranieri. He's the best. He'll help you out. Morgan Strategic Wealth. Hey, your folks have to retire sometime, and John Morgan will help set them up for life. And Sam's Sweet Shop in Millbrook. It has the best ice cream and shakes around, not to mention some great old-time candy. All right, some shout-outs to go around. Has anybody seen the new paint job on the front of the press box at the Arlington football field? Home of the Admirals, baby. One of the great places for atmosphere at a game here in the Hudson Valley. And, oh my God, I don't even want to talk about or think about not having fall sports. How about Red Hook girls basketball star Morgan Tompkins? She got her first Division I scholarship offer, and it came from Marist College. Good to see Coach Brian George is still kind of keeping it in the family here in the Hudson Valley, and congrats to Morgan. She's obviously going to have her pick of places as the offers start to roll in. Speaking of girls basketball, saw some very cool videos on Twitter. One was Arlington's Mia Castillo, and another one was Mayapac's Mel DeMeo, both doing home workouts, separately, of course. And oh my gosh, can they handle the rock? Wow, you got to check these out. They're pretty cool. It was also very cool for the Wappingers community to do a drive-by for Ella Garner. She is the Wappingers girls lacrosse standout who committed to Hartwick, but she couldn't have your traditional college signing because of COVID-19. So instead of the folks coming to the library at the school or something like that, friends and family came to her. They were honking their horns, driving by her house, down her street. Very nice, very, very nice gesture on their part. Speaking of Hartwick, Goshen quarterback Matt Giordano and wide receiver Logan Mullane will both play there next year, they announced. Something tells me they should have some pretty good chemistry together. And finally, former Roosevelt girls hoop star Cameron Hammond. She hasn't skipped a beat on or off the court. She now plays for Dutchess Community College. She was picked as an honorable mention All-American in Division III National Junior College Athletic Association women's basketball. This was after she averaged 25.6 points per game. That was good for sixth in the nation. And she also did it in the classroom, grading out that carrying a 4.0 after the first semester. So great job by Cam. Final word. Our final word tonight is condolences, unfortunately. Our thoughts and prayers go out to the friends and family of Joe Detz, one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. He unfortunately passed away from COVID-19. Joe coached Marlboro boys basketball for many years. That's probably where you may it may ring a bell. His name for you at Marlboro, winning a Section 9 title in one of those years, and then he moved over to college basketball at SUNY Orange before retiring last year. He was one of the kindest, just most genuine guys out there. Always said what was on his mind, and always had a fierce devotion to his players and the Marlboro community. Very, very sorry to hear of his passing, Joe Detz. And that'll wrap it up for this week. Be back at you next week. I'm Rich Tomaselli, and that's the Hvsr Podcast for week 2.